Special Forces were busy over the weekend. There were two raids, one in Libya and one in Somalia, and one went pretty well. The other we're not hearing too much about, but we have, if anybody knows what's going on, it's our next guest, Senior National Security Correspondent for Newsweek, Eli Lake. How you doing, Eli?
I'm good. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
All right, so let's start with the one that apparently went very well. It was in Tripoli, Libya. They got a guy by the name of Anas al-Libi for the 98 bombings of the embassies in Tanzania and, forgive me, I forget.
It's Tanzania and Kenya.
Kenya, thank you. So is this guy still a player, and what happened there?
Well, I've heard that he was very much out of the game. I mean, he was definitely in his middle age and was not in the prime years for most terrorists and terrorist plotters, but nonetheless a very important victory. And it's important also for the Obama administration because despite the fact that they say they have a preference for capturing terrorists, this is only the second time that under the Obama administration U.S. forces have raided somebody and they've actually captured the guy. That does not necessarily mean that they haven't contributed to the capture of terrorists with allied security forces, but at least in terms of people that have been acknowledged to have been, raided and then captured a lot, it's only the second time. And, under Bush, you capture people, they go to Guantanamo, and they face a military commission. Obama has not sent anybody to Guantanamo because he's been trying to close that place. And so it really does, kind of present or reignite, in my view, an old debate that's been waging really since Obama came into office, which is what do you do when you capture these guys alive?
All right, so what about the second raid in Somalia where we're not hearing as much?
Well, the second raid in Somalia, I think in some ways could be more important because what you're talking about there is, one of the last safe havens for an actual leader of al-Shabaab. That's the group, as we know, that was responsible for the awful kind of, almost paramilitary style raid on the Westlake Mall in Nairobi. And that, I think, is extremely important. Although we're hearing some reports that they may have been tipped off, but nonetheless, that I think is extremely important, even though that did not end up in a capture, it ended up in a kill.
So, Eli Lake, I just want to go back to one point you just made. I mean, generally speaking, the Obama administration's policy toward terrorists is to send some drones over there and off these guys so they don't have to deal with the messy aspect of capturing them and then figuring out what to do with them because they really made so much political hay out of condemning Guantanamo and rendition and all the other Bush-Cheney policies. So now they've got this guy. They're going to hand him over to Eric Holder and try him in a federal court?
Well, I think what's happened is he's now in a Navy brig. He will be there probably for a short amount of time. The last guy they had was someone named Barsami. He was on a brig for 2 months, and they did not announce, by the way, that they had him on a brig for those 2 months. So he was sort of in detention, and nobody knew, and then he was sent to the New York District Court. In this particular case, I think you're going to see Abu Anas al-Libi taken fairly quickly to the district court, and I think it reflects in some ways the sense that they don't think that there's going to be much intelligence value in holding him and detaining him and interrogating him for intelligence reasons as opposed to getting him to confess, as Warsami eventually did, to a crime.
How much latitude does the Obama administration have on this? Can't the House Armed Services Committee and members of the House of Representatives chime in here and say, hold on a minute here, we should...
Well, actually, the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, Buck McKeon, has chimed in and said, I really hope you don't turn him over to the courts until you've done as thorough a job as you have to in interrogating him. But here's the dirty little secret. From just a legal perspective, forget the practice, because I think it is significantly different, but from a legal perspective, Obama and Bush both have gone in court and argued that they have the right to detain suspects indefinitely by the military by the same war powers that kind of created, if you will, the war on terror. I've called it the September 14th resolution because it was passed 3 days after 9/11, but Obama and Bush have asserted the same kind of extraordinary power to detain people. It's just that Obama has said he would rather close Guantanamo, move towards taking a law enforcement approach, and the rhetoric is very different. But at least from the legal argument is the same, and that's an important point I think it's an important data point that I always like to point out to my to Democrats and liberals, which is to say, listen, this president has sort of asserted the same legal position as his predecessor. They just have a different way of talking about it.
All right, let's go back to that Somalia raid for a moment, because you said something that caught my ear. You say that there's some speculation that they may have been tipped off?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I've covered Iraq. I've been to Iraq. I've been to these places, and one thing I've learned is that it's hard to tell in the first 24 hours after an event like this all of the facts. The initial things that we heard about the raid in Somalia was that there was a firefight, which suggested that it was not a surprise, which would suggest that it was tipped off. But that more than that at this point, I don't know.
All right, and we don't really know whether or not we got the target that we went after, correct?
I think we have. I mean, that's how we've talked about it. But I don't. At this point, I don't think we've gotten confirmation. But
no firm confirmation
that we've gotten the target.
All right, good. Okay.
Eli, and just swinging back to Libya real fast, and thank you, by the way. Eli Lake is our guest and joins us, national security correspondent for Newsweek magazine and Daily Beast. Eli, back to Libya. When I think I like many other Americans, when we heard that we sent the SEALs in to get a bad guy, an Al Qaeda guy in Libya, we were hoping it had to do with Benghazi. I think people will be surprised to find out it had to do with a bombing from 15, 20 years ago. While they were there, I mean, anything on Benghazi?
Well, that is. Well, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, we know that there have been opportunities to get the perpetrators of the Benghazi raid that are kind of living openly in Benghazi.
Yeah, I mean, while you're going to Libya, why not get these guys?
Get these guys, yeah.
Well, there was a great New York Times story on that got into this one question where they interviewed a kind of local jihadist sheikh. And he brought this up. He said, listen, everybody's aware now that the U.S. will do this from time to time, so they're probably in hiding. But it does raise an interesting question. Why go after the plotter of the 98 bombing in Libya without telling the government of Libya, and then not go after the Benghazi guys?
Well, you don't have to comment on this, but my personal feeling about this is they don't want people to know what was going on there at the annex.
Eli Lake, always a pleasure to have you. We prefer to just read you and your partner Josh Rogan at the Daily Beast, but just this once we will swing over to the New York Times, the article you recommended, and we will quickly glance, but then we'll go right back to
we'll go back.
Thank you very much.
All right. Eli Lake, thanks for joining us.